Falls. Hello, everybody. You're at the work session for the Board of Mayor Alderman for April the 12th, 2022. And the first item on the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to make comments on items that are not on the agenda. So the tradition is to fill out a speaker card, which is on that center column, and bring those to me, and not during the meeting, but now. So I do have some for some items that are on the agenda. And so, seeing nobody rushing forward, we're going to start out by going items 1 through 6, which are events that we've had before, such as Rodeo Parade, Juneteenth, Bluegrass along the Harpeth, Franklin Classic, Wind Down Main Street, and Turkey Trot. Any questions or comments about those?
Mr. Mayor, could you do roll call before you go too far?
Okay, can I do it after this?
Yeah, just before you get too far. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do it as soon as I finish this. So any comments on that? If not, I'll now move to the roll call. Alderman Barnhill.
Present.
Vice Mayor Blanton. Not here. Alderman Hanson.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Here.
Alderman Brown.
Here.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
And Alderman Baggett.
Present.
Okay. No other comments. We'll move on to item 7. But before I go to item 7, I would like to alert you that item 14 is going to take about an hour. So as you make your comments and things, just have that in mind so I don't get too nervous down here. So item 7 is draft amendment number 3 to the City of Franklin Contract 2018-0143 with CDM Smith for the Water Reclamation Facility Expansion and Upgrades Project.
I missed that sequence. Okay, so this is for additional services for CDM Smith for the expansion of the wastewater plant project. So this, change order 10, which is on consent tonight, that went through CIC, will extend the substantial completion date to March 5th. Kiewit is, as per Kiewit's latest schedule update, they are about 183 days behind schedule at this point. So for those additional days, we need CDM Smith to provide inspection services during that time. We intend to recover liquidated damages from Kiewit during that time to cover these costs. So it's kind of a paperwork process. We're going to pull the liquidated damages from Kiewit, and then this is going to allow CDM Smith contractually to continue their inspection services during that time. We also need to provide additional Davis-Bacon wage rates. That's an SRF requirement, and that's really dictated based on schedule time. So that continues those interviews that we have with some of the Kiewit's employees for that extended time. The amendment also includes design for the influent pump station odor control. So that's something that we have talked about for quite a while. We didn't put that in this initial design because the influent pump station was built so long ago that the code that it would have to be brought up to now is significant, the amount of improvements that would be needed to bring it up to current code. So we are going to do the design on that, and then our anticipation is when the current construction ends, is we would then bid out the improvements underneath a separate contract just with the city to upgrade the odor control. So the benefit of doing the odor control now is that CDM has designed most of that plant already, so they already know the portion of that, and then we'll do it integrated with the existing work out there. So like all the additional meetings we would have would be on the same time for the project that's already occurring. So I see you, Alderman Brown, shaking his head.
Just what's the timing on that? Now we're adding that. What is that timing? By the way, yes, all day long, yes. Now, but what's the timing on it?
To complete the design. That's anticipated to be about 6 to 8 months, I think, for the design. So we'll have a completed design, but won't be ready to bid it out until maybe another year or so. But the existing unit is undersized. It's from the 90s, and it's by a manufacturer that doesn't exist anymore, so finding parts on eBay is not quite ideal. So.
Okay, item 8, Resolution 2022-10, a resolution amending the REM PUD subdivision to extend the vested rights for the property located southeast of McEwen Drive and west of Carruthers, Parkway establish a public hearing for May the 10th, 2022. Amy?
Yes, thank you. This is a vesting request to extend the Orium's vested rights for 2 years until June 24th, 2024.
Any questions? Y'all took me seriously on the hour, didn't you? How about a discussion of the Williamson County Growth Plan update and property owner request for removal from the Franklin urban growth boundary? I'll call you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, folks who want to talk, I'll call you up in a minute. Let's get through this process.
Would you mind taking one and passing one? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the fall of 2021, the city solidified its proposed UGB recommendations as part of the Williamson County Growth Plan update. And actually, would you mind pulling up the attachment that says property owner request map in Civic Clerk? We have like a couple attachments, but that would be probably the most helpful. Since the fall of 2021, multiple property owners have contacted the staff requesting to be removed from the UGB, and the attached maps identify the locations of those properties to be removed. They're requesting it. Since the official growth plan process has not started yet, the staff wanted to bring these requests to your attention and receive board guidance. And I'll briefly review the requests. And some of the property owners are here and would like to address the board about their unique situations. There are 3 properties located south along US 31 Columbia Pike. Barry Alexander Farms, which is roughly 255 acres, half of which is in the Franklin UGB, the other half is in Thompson Station city limits. Southview Community Church, and they have a 13-acre parcel. And then there are 170 acres owned by A1 Home Builders. They're all shown in the hatch on this map. The purple line is the actual in this quadrant of the community, the proposed and current UGB. They're not recommending any changes at this point. And then the red line represents the corporate city limits. So those are along US 31, along the fringe of the UGB near Thompson Station. If you go to the next map, there are 2 properties along Carter's Creek Pike that have requested removal. Southall Farms, which is approximately 400 acres, and the map that I just distributed accurately depicts their holdings. The map in Civic Clerk is a little bit off, so I wanted to clarify that. That was brought to our attention this afternoon. And then also 1951 Carter's Creek Pike. That property owner has requested to be removed as well. And then if you wouldn't mind going to the 3rd map in the PDF packet there. During the outreach process last fall, several property owners along Paytonsville Road sought to remain outside of the UGB, and staff highlighted those requests at the time last fall and recommended leaving them in the proposed UGB. And that's still the case, but since we're here tonight and we're talking about some of these other properties that are requesting to be removed, I also wanted to highlight and give them that opportunity to address the board as well. And then lastly, once the official process to update the county growth plan commences, we only have 6 months to complete the approval process. So we're trying to resolve as many disputes as possible prior to the initiation of the formal adoption process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I would just add a little bit here. I think you'll hear specifically from some of the property owners, and I think that's helpful. But what the board, I think, we want to hear from you is the broader policy guidance. And when we set out what we did, we looked at alignment of infrastructure and things like drainage basins and where infrastructure made sense to be. And I think I would suggest we look at it through that lens as well. We want to be responsive to these property owner requests, but you also have to think about, does it have any impacts on our ability to serve and work with the broader UGB area? And so, some of these may be on the fringe, may not be of the boundary, may not have that impact. Andrew referenced the areas in the southeast. We're looking at that as a whole drainage basin, so that may be a a consideration there. And so those are just all factors to think about in terms of how you want to apply the broader policy guidance that you provided us earlier in this process as we gear up for the formal part of it. And we welcome your guidance and any feedback we can provide in terms of how that fits with how you guided us into this, at least this preliminary look at the boundaries. So we're glad to answer any questions you have and welcome any other feedback.
And one other comment I would make is, even if you're in the UGB, that doesn't mean you're annexed.
Correct.
Annexation law has changed in the state of Tennessee a few years ago, and annexation is no longer by ordinance. It has to be requested by the property owner. So,
Or by a vote, or by a referendum.
Or by a
vote. That's really-
referendum.
So it's really driven by the property owner's wishes, if they come in or not. So that's another consideration.
would the board like to hear from citizens?
Sure, they're here.
One other thing, we do not know when the formal process is going to start. There's not a time set for that yet. There's still some work going on in the various communities in terms of refining where they are and what they want to put into the process. Once you start the process, there's some pretty specific timelines. So I think folks are trying to think through options before they start the formal clock ticking, if you will. So
Well, here,
Does everyone start at the same time?
it's a whole, yeah, it's
Yeah,
one
it's not-
process for the whole county. Yes.
so here's the order I'm going to ask our speakers to come up. Mark Rampula, Bo Bass, Craig Hoover, and Josh Denton, and I'll give each of you 2 minutes. Oh, perfect.
Well, I'm Mark Rampula. I'm the pastor of Southview Church, and so we have some of that land. We have 13 acres that were given to us a few years ago. We are currently in Spring Hill, and so we're looking to grow and build a church on that land. And the biggest issue for us, because of the size that we want to do and the meetings we want to have, is connecting to sewer. And so we are kind of out there, and we were looking at building a septic field and all that stuff. And to do the church that we need to do, function during the week, have the meetings, we actually can't have a septic field big enough that would be accommodating for us. So we've been talking with Thompson Station, who has sewer closer, would be able to get it to us sooner than we could through Franklin. So we love Franklin. I have no problem with Franklin. We just wanted to get sewer set up so we could build a church and meet throughout the week and have multiple services and things. So that's really why we're here.
Very good, thank you.
What is that location again?
What's your location again?
We're the
Mark?
one right on the corner of Goose Creek and 31. It's that triangle piece, 13
Okay.
acres.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question about that particular one. May I ask?
Go
it?
ahead.
So if they are kept in the UGB down there, are we prohibited from providing sewer to them if they needed it? I mean, no, is Thompson Station prohibited from providing sewer to them?
Yes, they would not be able to annex this property because it's located in our urban growth boundary.
But we provide sewer outside our city limits.
So
Can
from what
they
I
not do
got,
that?
from what I understand from Thompson Station, they will only do that to like emergency services, not for just private development.
And how do we know on this map where that sewer is located compared to ours?
There's an emergency services facility that's 2 parcels down from the church site that they would.
Get that
Ca-
pointed
yeah,
out to
ca-
us somewhere?
This is
yeah.
difficult to figure this map out too.
Ma'am, would
because
you mind
it's
pulling
not-
the map back up? I'm sorry.
When you give these maps, I would really like to have a little bit more
If you
detail.
could go to the first slide.
Yeah, I know where it is. It's just, this is Columbia, or Lewisburg, right? Or, no, what is that? That's Columbia.
This is
Is
That's-
that where it goes
yes.
off?
So you had a previous agreement for the rescue squad building to provide that service, as I remember. And the understanding is when city sewer gets to that area, they will tie on the city sewer at that time.
Where?
To the rescue squad.
Okay, yes.
Facility, which is just north of that, I believe. And so you provided for that with an agreement between Franklin and Thompson Station, with the understanding that once City of Franklin sewer got to that area, they would then tie on to our system. So that's probably your one kind of exception that you did by specific agreement with Thompson Station. And that's why they're approaching this in the way that they are, to be consistent with how they generally operate around extending services.
Okay.
Yeah, that actual sewer, I think, goes right past our land, so we're fine with tapping
It's
into
right there.
whatever, as long as we can get on the
Yeah.
sewer would be for us, so,
Okay,
thank you.
great.
Mr. Bass?
We have sewer down there now?
We do not. They are tying into the Thompson Station sewer on a temporary basis, or what, you know, in terms of, as long as our service isn't extended there.
And that's the rescue.
The rescue squad has service through Thompson Station.
And what kind of sewer does Thompson Station have? It's only on site for the individual developments, isn't it?
They have a
think so.
centralized sewer system. It's limited, but they have a centralized sewer system.
840 is just a little south of that.
Because
What you got is Goose Creek and.
Barry's
and
property
31
touches 840 though. See, and that doesn't make any sense to
If you
me.
look just south of the large hatched property at the very bottom of the screen, you can see the black outline of 840 at the very bottom of the left side of the screen. That is 840 that comes through.
Go ahead, Mr. Bass. Introduce yourself.
Howdy, how are you guys this afternoon? My name is Bo Bass. We acquired 1951 Carter's Creek this fall, and our concerns regarding the urban growth boundary is the limitations that we have in regards to sewer as well. Our property is currently zoned MGA 1 under the county designation. If it were to remain in the UGB, I understand that the city has plans on turning the property into a development conservation area, which would reduce the density. And for us, that would be a concern. As it stands, we can currently provide by right 1 unit per acre, and we were hoping to find out what the board's intentions were in regards to the district, because it does have an impact on, one, which group we petition for, whether central septic or whether we petition the city for sewer. And primarily, our goal was just to voice our concerns about the situation.
So you're just a little from Miller Recycling?
Directly
Right-
next door
right
to
beside
Miller's,
it.
yes, sir, and directly across the street from the beautiful South Hall development.
Okay.
Who we'll hear from now, maybe. Craig Hoover.
Angie, if you could go to the second map now, please.
Thank you, guys. My name is Craig Hoover. I'm the Senior Vice President of Development for South Hall. We're a new farm-based luxury resort opening this summer. Hopefully, at this point, some of you have heard of us. We've got about 450 acres at the intersection of South Hall and Carter's Creek, and I'm here to ask that we be removed from the UGB. Our acreage, specifically, you know, how we're impacted is, it includes, as you can see on that little node on the northeast or the northwest portion of the big parcel there, is MGA-H, which is a Municipal Growth Area Hamlet. So as you can see, I've got on the front of that is the master plan for our village, and we, because of the MGA-H rules, we had to design the whole thing, program all the uses, and match up with Williamson County septic regulations. And the truth is that what that means is that we have really big buildings. You can see in the little cutout there is that what we were forced to do is build 4,000 or 5,000 square foot, mixed-use structures up front. And that's not really the responsible way to develop a village organically. But of course, there is another way, because we are allowed on the MGA-1 site to have an advanced wastewater treatment center. And so while we won't know for sure until we have a little bit of data, we believe we've got way more capacity to serve what the village could do. And so what we'd like to be able to do is to develop the village organically with a smaller smaller units so we can, entice small business owners, a florist, a bakery, a little sandwich shop, that kind of thing, to, develop over time, over 20, 50 years, a village right there that actually responds to market demand and is more appropriate contextually. And I think from experientially and economically, I think that would benefit the city and the county better. And if we were removed, then we would become just H, which would allow us to tap into into our advanced wastewater treatment center. That's all I got.
Thank you.
But by the way, I've spoken with the Cradys to our west, and I've spoken with Bubba Miller to our north. They're all in favor of a UGB, and so between us and Bo and Bubba and Candy, that's pretty much all the developable land on that corridor. So we're all in favor of it. So it feels right. I'm here to take any questions you might have.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm intimately familiar with this, and I helped with the subdivision at 1951 Carter's Creek that was part of RJR Enterprises, and went down that path with them when they did all the perking. So there's another parcel, if you're facing your property just to the left, that also belong to the same people. Did you acquire that property as well? They cleared it? Is that somebody else? So they're not part of this request?
No, that's traditional
Okay.
septic they're planning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Denton.
So, wait, did
You
you,
go
s-
ahead.
you say you want out of the urban growth boundary?
We do. Well, we requested to be annexed, back 4 or 5 years ago. And then the reply from the staff was that sewer out there was not really tenable based on the drainage basin and everything. So it feels like that's going to be the case for some time, particularly with all these property owners controlling that development. It's going to be, we're going to be hard pressed to make a case for y'all to bring sewer out there.
But if you have to make the request to be annexed, you have to make it the way it's set up now.
Right.
Why would you want out of the urban growth boundary?
Well, because by county ordinance, the fact that we're in the UGB means that we're in a zoning class of MGAH. And MGAH means, just because of an agreement between you, the way I understand it, is that you guys, the city and the county, have an agreement that MGAH people won't use advanced treatment facilities. There's some nuance there, but we couldn't do that. And so if we were to be removed, then we would be H, which would allow that. And so that's the biggest driver, or the biggest hindrance to our, effective development.
Go ahead, Josh.
Thanks, guys.
Good evening. I'm Josh Denton, and I'm here representing A1 Home Builders, and I've got Brandon Robertson, the principal, there as well. And we see a theme, I think. The issue for the A1 Home Builders property is also sewer. And this is a little bit of a unique situation because prior to A1 Home Builders acquiring that property, its predecessor actually entered a contractual agreement with Thompson Station to transfer certain property to Thompson Station in connection with its sewer facility, a sewer plant. And in exchange was promised annexation to be annexed in and sewer to be provided to a portion of the property that A1 Home Builders has acquired. So we actually, a year or so ago, explored with the city attorney and a number of staff the possibility of actually just going ahead and being annexed within the city of Franklin. And given the location and the challenges and where things are with the city, that was not a positive response in the sense it didn't look like that would happen for a long time. And based on the contractual obligations, Thompson Station actually has to annex part of the property, which can't happen if we're in the urban growth boundary for the city of Franklin. That's part of the driving force here, is to try to work out some arrangement with them to complete their contractual obligation to provide sewer to a portion of it, and then hopefully have sewer provided by Thompson Station to the balance of the property. So glad to answer any questions, and also in advance, as you all are processing that, lay that out a little bit more formally with some documentation for you all as well to be able to review. if that would be helpful, so.
Was it that Thompson Station and Franklin just didn't agree, or was it not that the cost was prohibitive to run sewer out there because they were going to have to do the development? So it wasn't necessarily that, was it necessarily that we backed out of it or we didn't want to do it? Wasn't it the cost and wasn't it their cost?
It's because these properties are not contiguous
Yeah.
or even close to our current sewer service. So the time frame for the city to have sewer service in this far out is just not in the near or even potentially midterm.
It's literally miles away
Yeah.
from our sewer at this point.
Got Mr. Gamble who wants to make a 30-second comment. Since he's late, I'm going to punish him.
Ooh, watch out.
Won't even be 30 seconds. My name is Greg Gamble, and I'm here at Barry Alexander's request. A portion of his property, which is shown here in the south, is in Thompson Station's urban growth boundary, and a portion of it is in the city of Franklin's. 100% of it drains toward the river, which is toward Thompson Station's sewer basin. So just want to put that on the record tonight. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Everybody?
Well, if-
Go ahead, Alderman
if-
Peterson.
If it drains towards Thompson Station's sewer basin, it sounds like that would not be a place that would be best served by us. I'll put it that way.
I don't know about the exact drainage basin of this property, but this property was already in the city's UGB, and when we went through this process, the direction given was to keep everything in the current UGB, in the proposed UGB. This was one property this is one property that we did consider removing as part of the staff recommendations due to the ownership issues along the line. But I don't know if anyone here from Water and Sewer knows, I don't know if Brian knows, but about the drainage basin piece of it. But
So this was one that staff had kind of proposed that we pull out. Okay.
Again, it's well away from when we're going to be able to serve it, and it's a timing and question about what the most efficient solution is. It's well out there in terms of when our infrastructure would get there.
I think at the time I was a lone vote on supporting that recommendation to pull it out. I think especially where we're doing really cool stuff down here and they have an opportunity to really add to what we're doing, it doesn't make sense for us to hold on something and limit something as fantastic as what's going on down there. So I would be in support of us removing that stuff.
Everybody good? Ready to move on?
Well, you were asking for guidance from the board, not necessarily what we wanted to pull or didn't want to pull, right?
Yeah, and
So,
I think our purpose tonight is for you to become aware of these
Yes.
requests. You don't have to make a decision right now. We can provide you with more detail on the specifics of them, and if there are questions around some of these service-related, what's the timing, how does it tie into what our existing plans are, we can clarify that for you. Some are right on, like these are right on the border. And it's well away from ours. There's a decision to be made about, does it make more sense for Thompson Station to serve those? That, and it doesn't create any kind of disruption or in any way impact others that are already in your UGB that want to stay in the UGB. I think that's the other thing to think about. And we can give you some more feedback on those elements. The slide that you're looking at right now, I don't think any of us see those as creating a problem with the rest of your UGB and how to manage growth over the long haul. They're kind of on the fringe.
yeah, preliminarily, I would say on the first map, everything is on the periphery. So it is easy for us to remove those if that's the direction of the board. In the Goose Creek area, which is the third map, staff is recommending generally to keep those because they are part of a greater drainage basin where sewer could serve those. There are some on the periphery that we could remove, but obviously there's more property owner requests deeper into the basin.
And this does match the basin, and that was the direction you provided in the fall, was to keep that kind of together, that drainage basin together. And again, we're not annexing them. We can't annex them unless they want to be annexed, so it doesn't really, it's kind of no harm, no foul kind of thing in that situation, and helps you keep continuity within the basin.
Exactly. And the second map is the one that we would probably need to meet with our internal working group and discuss more, because removing some of these properties that requested removal might impact other property owners farther down the line for sewer. And it would probably be more of a situation where more properties also would need to be removed in addition to these, because we wouldn't necessarily be able to jump over and provide service farther down the line. So that we'd really need to talk about with our internal working staff group to analyze that more.
And also, let us see where the sewer is now.
Yes.
That would be very
Yeah,
helpful on
that's-
many of
That's
these.
exactly what I wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah.
In all of
there's-
these
none of them are
areas, they
close.
are miles away.
Well,
No,
give
but
us
I
a bigger
mean,
map.
we're
I want to know.
We're glad to provide that to
Yeah,
you, but there's
really.
nothing close.
Yeah,
Just for context.
I agree. I was thinking that too, but there's a couple things. First of all, you know, Matt said it too, you know, people are doing really interesting things and some innovation, and if that's not allowed in the MGAH, then, you know, I think you ought to have the freedom to be innovative and do those things. Plus, the other thing is, when we provide, second of all, then if somebody wanted to be annexed in, they have to, as we know, have to request to be annexed in. We can't annex them in. If they have no reason to be annexed in or ask for it, then they won't do that. And the other thing is, if they did, we're supposed to provide sewer and services, including sewer, in a reasonable amount of time. Well, that's not reasonable. We don't have a reasonable amount of time that we could even address that. So I'm pretty good with these properties. I'm really not in favor of taking areas out of our UGB for a lot of different reasons, but you have some unique exceptions here that I think they do have unique exceptions here that are brought to us for a reason, and I appreciate hearing those reasons. And I agree with Ann, we need to, just for our own sake, we need to know like where the sewer is. And sometimes even these maps these are good, but sometimes having a larger map with all that pointed out on it so we can see what's outside of that.
Sure.
Because we're not driving that every day. I know my ward like back of my hand, but I don't know this area like that back. I know it, but I don't, so you know what I mean. Thanks.
Okay, we're going.
On this one, real quick, we have had some preliminary discussions with the county around how that might be able to be managed. We hear the concern around what the county zoning allows, and if there might be an option to work within this, with the county and the city to provide that and remain in the UGB. I don't know if we can fully answer that, but we have engaged in that to say, is there a way to address the concern of the property owner, but still keep it in the UGB so that it doesn't disrupt properties that are around it in the direction that you all
Right.
provided in the fall, which is to kind of hold that area together, even though it's got challenges. It's not just distance, it's topography in terms of
Right.
how you'd serve it. So,
True.
I mean, it's a
It's not
challenging
just sewer.
area of our UGB. But there may be some ways to work and solve the issue that was
Yeah.
brought up and still keep it in the UGB. So that's something we're trying to work through with the county. Andrew's had the conversations, he may be able to
Well-
describe it better than I, but that's the nature of what we're trying to look at, is at least as an option.
Yeah, if
For
it
you and
does-
for the property owner to consider.
If it doesn't hinder them from possibly doing an advanced treatment facility, then I'm all for that, but that's fine. I just don't want to put a thumb on them and say, well, you're hampered now,
Sure.
and you can't do it, because that does not give any options, and I like options for these people.
Well, this area was part of the, was originally recommended to be out of it too, yeah. So,
It's good to hear the folks and give their reasons. How about item 10, Amendment 2 to the City of Franklin Contract 2020-0055 with the City of Franklin, Tennessee and Urgent Care Team Management of Tennessee, LLC.
This is a pretty straightforward renewal and extension.
It is
Okay.
very straightforward. It was, the term would be up in April. We're extending it one more year. We have 2 more times we can do that. We're just extending the St. Thomas Ascension urgent team for 1 more year, the near-site clinic.
And this has been really well-received for our team members and their families. It was a godsend as COVID kicked in and gave us a lot of additional services and support, but it's good for the day-to-day and on weekends and off times to be able to get service and care. And our team members and their families get sort of expedited appointment opportunities too. So it's really been a successful service and helped us provide better service and also manage costs over time, we believe, too.
Correct.
Were we to have an introduction tonight? or
You
would
know,
wanna
we
do that at
forgot to
another
do that, but
time?
we can do that now.
Well, since we have Kevin here and you're here both, so I thought we
Let
might.
me share 2 things with you. We meant to say this at the beginning, but Catherine Harrelson, who's been our management fellow, is now in a new position with the city. She's our development services analyst, so she'll be working with our development services team out of the Building and Neighborhood Services department. So we're excited for her for that opportunity, and congratulations, Catherine. So she's not going anywhere, and you'll see her presenting, I think, at this meeting in 2 weeks, so, get ready. So that'll be good. But we have the remainder of that management fellow opportunity, and we have a great candidate that we have brought on to fill that, and that's Jamie Ewald. And Jamie is just completing her Master's in Public Administration degree at the University of Missouri. And she is also comes with a great professional background in some other areas in the nonprofit world, and is transitioning into public service and in local government. So she's going to work in that management fellow role for the remainder of that term, and will also be doing some specific work for us in human resources. So we look forward to bringing her on board and in that role, and look forward to having her on our team. So welcome, Jamie.
Okay, item 11 is a resolution to recognize Tennessee State Supreme Court Justice Cornelia Clark through the addition of honorary street signage along the length of 4th Avenue in the city of Franklin.
Take it away.
Thank you, sir. So as we've discussed at previous meetings, I think the last one we had a conversation about this was 2 meetings ago. We talked about an overarching program for honorary street naming projects in the city as we move forward. This one's specific to Justice Clark. Mr. Julian Bibb introduced this concept a number of months ago, and based on feedback from the board, we've decided to move forward and produce a resolution with his support and guidance, and request that this resolution be approved, and we honorarily name 4th Avenue after Justice Clark. Street name will remain the same, addresses will remain the same, and as you can see in the memo, she has a long list of contributions to this community, to the country, in fact. So anyway, it's, in my opinion, a worthy honor. She's lived her entire adult life on 4th Avenue. I can't say enough about her. Eric, I don't know if you have anything to add, but.
No, and the other thing, we will bring, following this, a more broad program related to honorary naming, but we felt that there was pretty clear support from the board, so we're bringing this forward, and you'll see in 2 weeks the outline of the broader general program, but it's consistent with what you're doing here. So we were just moving this aspect, and then we'll bring the more overall program to you in 2 weeks.
Very good. Items 12 and 13 are procurement awards. One is to Spectra Tech LLC of Nolensville for wastewater structure rehabilitation services, and the other is for improvements to the event facility at the Eastern Flank Battlefield Park. Any questions about those? As Michelle comes up to give her.
I think you're ready to go to 14.
Okay, we're good. Just kidding.
So
14,
no
you're
questions.
up-
We're
you're up
ready
next.
to go to item 14, which is the proposed water and sewer impact fees. We're getting so much training,
Yeah.
so many hours of credit for the board for doing this, which we have to have.
Some spotlight too. So that's how I get your attention, is I apply for board credit, so. Okay. So I brought the brains with me this time. For those of y'all who haven't met him, this is Brian Goodwin, the assistant director. Thank you. The assistant director. He came from Clarksville and kind of is the brains behind this methodology. Okay, so go to the first slide. Next slide. So I want to kind of reiterate some of the things we've already talked about as to kind of why we're doing this as a refresher, why we're proposing this change to impact fees. Go over the definition and the types of impact fees. So there's two different types. And then we'll go over we'll present those proposed changes, which you've probably seen in the presentation already, and then the project schedule of how these need to be implemented. And then we can kind of, wrap it up with some discussions. So the next slide. So we've talked about already, so meter size, the way we currently assess impact fees isn't an equitable capture of impacts to the system. So the way that we're proposing and that we've talked about previously is demand-based rather than meter-based. And so we've also talked about the question as to why we should increase impact fees. And so we have a lot of, as we talked about the UGB, topic just a little bit ago, we have a lot of demand that's coming to our system, whether it be in the distribution system or demand in the collection system as well. That additional capacity equates to capacity needed at treatment plants as well. That additional capacity isn't cheap, but that capacity drives the need for the development drives the need for additional capacity rather. And so most importantly, no, it's right. So most importantly, the increase in impact fees will then offset the impact to ratepayers that we see. So we talked about the SRF loan monies, and the debt coverage has to be included in ratepayers, a consistent revenue source, whereas if we can collect that money, we reduce the amount that we would need to borrow, right? So next slide. Okay, so I'm going to turn it, Brian has these couple slides in which he was kind of the brainchild of these, so I want to.
SFUE, the wonderful acronym that we've all grown to appreciate in water management. Essentially, SFUE is defined in Title 18 of the City of Franklin, and it represents 350 gallons per day. But the main thing to get out of the slide is to understand that is a planning number. You can't take 350 gallons a day, multiply it by 30, and expect it to match your water bill. It's not going to happen. We use that number to ensure that we have capacity at the pipe at its peak points. And those peak points we define as diurnal curves. And so with that in mind, there's an example at the bottom, and it's probably more of an extreme example, but very similar to residential. Think about the Tennessee Titans in the football stadium during football season. They have 2 home games a month typically. They get a bill for that stadium, a monthly bill over a 30-day period. But the usage or the need of that flow occurs probably at halftime over 2 days during the month. So really, you've got to have the capacity for those compressed time frames that we're looking at. So purpose of this slide is to understand what the 350 gallons a day is an accepted planning number. It's been adopted by 10 state standards. Many cities and communities have always used that number to assess capacity and check for developments and what is needed so that you have adequate capacity in your system. Next slide, please. Okay, here's an example. The curves that you're looking at on the left-hand side, that's actually from our flow meter from West Haven. And you can see about 8 a.m. we peaked out in the sewer capacity system for that flow, and at 8 p.m. was another peak. So that's an example of where we've got to have the pipe size and capacity for those peaks, okay? And again, it relates back to the planning number that we use to determine the sizing we need, and all that summed up to even come and check for what you need for, plants, future plants, things of that nature. And the curve on the right-hand side is an example of during a Super Bowl, extreme case of diurnal curves.
So we just to spend, so the curve on the left, the one at West Haven, so we have flow monitors throughout the system, where we look at the flow in the sewer and we assess whether there's, more flow than we expect, and we, do a rehab project, or less flow than we expect, and we investigate that more. So that's what we typically see, is we typically see two big humps during the day. So, right, like the first one, when everyone's waking up in the morning, taking showers, cooking breakfast, starting laundry, all the things that you do. Then the second hump, when everyone comes home, starting laundry, taking baths, cooking dinner, all that sort of stuff. So if you go a little bit farther and you look at the wastewater plant as well, or you look at the water plant on the front side, you'll see those same curves, right, but just a little bit different of a time. So, West Haven, all of that flow comes through the pump station, gets pumped to our plant. So their diurnal curve is probably going to be maybe at like 10 o'clock and, 10 o'clock both times during the day. So it's really important that we have to size it based off of when everyone's in the morning, going to the bathroom and taking showers, right? That's the demand. So you expect that amount of water. That's what we have to provide you. You expect that amount of collection. That's what we have to provide you. So we racked our brain trying to think of some good examples to show y'all to kind of better explain that purpose. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay.
All right. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, these are this is an example comparison of actual facilities that are constructed in the city of Franklin connected to our water and sewer system. In order to protect the innocent, we're not using names, but these are true facilities. As you can see, and what Michelle has alluded to, is that we are trying to make it more equitable. And here's a prime example of why it's not. As you can see, Building A is about 40,000 square foot. They have the same type occupancy groups. And Building B is about 219,587 square feet and has many more employees than Building A does every day coming to that facility. When they submitted, they both a 3-inch tap, because a 3-inch meter has a wide range of capacity. So they both got a 3-inch capacity, but they paid the same impact fee. But as you can see, the actual impact to the sewer system is really from Building B. But again, they paid the same amount. So our whole purpose of coming up with a methodology was to look and acquire more revenues to help our system and design and get monies for additional capacity based on examples such as these.
Okay, so we'll do next slide. So here we'll actually go into, we've talked a lot about an impact fee, and I probably should have pulled this slide a lot earlier in our series of presentations that I have. So what's the actual definition of an impact fee? So we rely on the American Water Works Association, which is one of the professional organizations that we belong to that outlines a lot of standards that we go by, a lot of guidelines. And so they define it as a contribution of capital toward existing or planned future plant facilities necessary to meet the service needs of customers, right? So it's pretty much how we define it in municipal code. There's two methods that you can use to calculate an impact fee. We'll go into those, but there's an equity buy-in method and then the incremental cost. We used both of those methods for our system. And then the charges that are collected, those fees collected, are intended to be used to finance all or in part capital improvements projects necessary. So for our existing plant, some of it is being funded by, some of it is growth driven, right, because we're expanding capacity, but then some of it is also being driven by it's an old plant. So we have the two different types of, fees coming in there. I wanted to point that out. So next slide. So the two types, the equity buy-in method, what that is, the purpose of that is to kind of assess new customers on the same playing field as existing customers as they've bought into the collection system. So we've invested a lot in our current collection system through, putting the pipes in the grounds to the, the annual rehab that we do on it. This is going to give new customers the equity to buy into that system, so to create a level playing field with new versus old customers. The incremental cost method is what we've used on the treatment plants, so the water plant and then the clean water plants as well, to assign the new development the capacity that they need. So we use the equity buy-in on the distribution and collection system, and we use the incremental cost on the plants, on the treatment facilities. And then you may remember, for the new aldermen, but for those old ones, you may remember last year, Jackson Thornton had presented those impact fees. So we used the actual data in creation of the model. We used actual, customer accounts to determine the number of customers we had, our annual usage, to come up with this model to develop this cost. So it was based off of actual data we had. So we'll get into that next slide. We'll get into the actual water. Next slide. So the equity buy-in for the distribution is with the model. So bringing new customers into the equity of the old customers is $1,800. The incremental cost, so the treatment capacity that we've expended already on the water plant is about $1,700 or $1,800. So the hybrid approach, which is using both of those, is about $3,600. So the next slide shows the summation of those costs. So the existing impact fee is about $2,100. The new impact fee that we're proposing is about $3,600. So this brings, as we talked about, it brings new customers up to that level playing field with the distribution system, collection system, and then it pays for the expanded capacity of that new plant to the development that drove it. Any questions on that one?
So this is strictly based on the water meter size. So as in the case of A and B, you'd be analyzing or projecting their predicted usage and base it on that. Is that correct?
So we kind of had two different topics. So we have the methodology that we're proposing to calculate SFUEs, and then the impact fee calculation was based off of the calculation of an SFUE in our system, right? So we use the customer accounts in our existing usage to calculate the SFUE. This is the number. So the $3,600 is what will be charged per SFUE. So then you take that back to our methodology that we proposed in the previous presentations, where one household is one SFUE. Commercial buildings are multiple SFUE, so they would be, multiple ratios of the $3,600. Okay. So this one is about a $1,500 increase these are the investments that we've already, at the water plant that we've already made. Let's see, we'll go into the next slide. So then we'll get into the sewer. Okay, so this is, so we have two incremental, costs for facilities for the treatment of sewer. So we have the existing facility on Claude Yates, and then we have kind of the additional capacity we need on the south end part of town. So we're increasing the capacity at I'm going to call it the Claude Yates facility. So we're increasing that capacity by 4 million gallons. That's the capacity that was included in this method. I talked about the two different types. So some of them is a renewal, and then some of it is based off of the growth, that 4 million gallons. So we estimated that cost at about $33 million with the entrance cost of borrowing money from our SRF loan. And that gives us a cost per SFUE of about $3,600. So that's for the existing facility, the construction that's undergoing right now. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, and this is where we'll spend a little bit of time on this one. So this is for the incremental cost for the proposed south facility, the proposed south capacity, I'll say. So as you know, we're undertaking the current contract we have with Hazen to look at additional capacity. So to recover the cost that we're embarking on right now, that's caused by development, right? We're only doing the work we're doing right now because of development, because of this additional need. So in the IWRP, we identified the additional facility down south to be at 8 million gallons for the additional capacity. And then you can see on the left-hand side is I've outlined all of the cost that we've gone through and we've vetted for the total investment for a south facility, right? So we have the current contract that we have with Hazen, which is looking at the type of facility that we would need, right? The current, and that's with the amendments that they've gotten that y'all have approved as well. So we have the pilot plant construction cost, which Heron is currently doing in the Red Wing neighborhood. We've refined that cost a little bit. So then we have the anticipated design cost for a future facility. That cost is based off of the cost that CDM had for design of the Claude Yates facility. So it's a fairly decent number. The anticipated construction cost, inspection cost. So right now at the Claude Yates facility, we have a number of inspectors that are watching the construction to ensure it meets our standards. We anticipate having that same need down at the South facility. Construction cost is what we're incurring right now with the Claude Yates facility. And then we also have the cost of borrowing money at 3.5% for 30 years. So we've included that cost in there as well to recapture. So when you add all of that together, you get an average cost of per SFUE of almost $11,000. So this is just for the new facility down south, right? So we'll go to the next slide. And it's not correct. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is kind of the summary of the cost. So we have the equity buy-in. So for new customers to come into the collection system on the same playing field, I missed the slide on that, and I apologize. I must have deleted that, but that's about $2,400. So we have the incremental cost from the Claude Yates facility, the incremental cost from the South facility, is a total investment impact fee that we see of a little over $16,700. So the current impact fee, you can see, is not nearly enough, right? So it's about a change of about $13,000 is what it needs to be increased to. So it's a large change, and I kind of want to open it up for any discussions.
Yeah, I got one. So just going back to building A and B, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. 350 gallons a day. Never mind. So if we were to, I want to see like what would building A and B impact fee be under the new model? This is where it is now. On this, it's 111,000. I'm just kind of curious. I'm not going to put anyone on the spot to do the math right now, but maybe just kind of comparing these commercial buildings that you showed us, like
Sure.
what the difference would be, like in magnitude. I'm sure we can do the math, but not right now. So I don't want to put you on the spot. But that would be, I'd be very curious to compare those two that you showed and kind of see the equity in action versus what we have today.
Okay.
But theoretically, what you do is you convert that usage into the SFUE. That becomes your unit of measurement. And that way you can allocate the cost more equitably based on actual usage, not an arbitrary meter size.
Right.
Go ahead, Alderman Potts. Wanted to go back, this part wasn't in the presentation, but we had talked about it before, about the different levels within the system. What's gonna, if you would, just expand a little bit on what's gonna keep somebody from trying to cheat the system, if you will? And then also, is there going to be any penalty for said overusage or for being in the wrong classification?
So the way that we intend on kind of implementing this is so the developer, actually, do you want to touch on this since you probably know?
Yeah, currently what we do, we require an availability when a developer comes in and applies to the Water Management Department to get that SFUE calculation. So our intention is when that availability comes to us, we'll assess what that calculates to under the new methodology. We'll run our models and stuff and check our capacity, tools and that type of thing to be sure it's there. And then with the methodology we developed, it really focuses on where you got mixed use, commercial, industrial, where, you know, a SFUE for those is more harder to calculate. So that's why we came up with the different use groups. So in those use groups, we've got demand factors and we've got what's called occupancy load factors. And what those are based on and what is the number of occupants that could potentially be in that facility. And then we have demand factors assigned to those occupancy groups as well to calculate to your SFUE number. What we will do in the city of Franklin, anytime you come and pull a permit, And when you have mixed uses with commercials and different occupancy classes, they have to turn in architectural drawings. And it's at that building permit fee time in which the fees are collected. We will add another step to shore up what was on the availability request and compare it to the architectural drawings to be sure that they are in the same realm of what was anticipated. If there needs to be any additional capacity checks at that time, of course, we'll do it. But that's how we're going to shore up and check to be sure that they stay, you know, true to what was submitted to us.
So I'm sorry. So you're assessing that at the time they pull a permit. So everything that's been approved but not built yet, that still hasn't even, those are still, could fall under this new model, this new methodology. Any current developments that have been approved, not built, or still vested, you know, we're extending some rights on some, but you don't put that, you're not putting this methodology in place until they pull a building permit on a certain build on that development.
I would say we wouldn't put it in place until we receive availabilities at the time that the new methodology in this is passed. Is that fair, or is that?
That's something we have to vet. So fees are not part of the entitlements.
Right.
So if a fee changes, then the developer is obligated to pay that fee. And I'm going to look to Vern to make sure I'm saying that correctly. So, yes, so the fees, if we use the same methodology, such as the meter size, for example, and we change the fees tomorrow, and it goes up $1,000, the developer will be obligated to pay that additional $1,000. We're doing not only a change in the amount of the rate per SFUE, but also the methodology in which it's calculated. Does that make sense?
And at permit.
And
It's at
The
permit.
permit's
Yeah.
paid.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
So that is the other question. I mean, because we've got a whole slew of approved, not yet constructed that were built or were approved based on, and you know, based on a set of economics that is going to now be drastically changed. That's a pretty big concern.
But they wouldn't have pulled their permit yet.
That's right. But when they do, and then they come into and then it's the new, but they got their development plan approved under a set of economics and bought the land. Am I misunderstanding that?
Well, in theory, you're correct. First of all, good evening. However, this really relates closely to the state's vesting legislation, and that was what you're talking about fees, about cost of service. Those can change as time goes forward. Investing, the development regulations can't change, but the fees for the cost of service can. And this is a cost of service. And that's really the economics that we're faced with when we, extend infrastructure in this case.
Understood. So I did the math on this, and Building B was $111,000. Their new fee would be $592,000. So I'm just thinking, if I came with a development plan, that's not a small change in the economics of a deal. It just is, to me, it's a bit fair to at least give some consideration for development plans that have already been approved by BOMA under a certain set of economics. And at some point, we'll have to draw a line, I guess, where what I'm hearing you say is we don't have to draw a line, because it's just, we can change fees whenever we want, and it doesn't really matter what has been approved in the set of economics that it was approved under. To me, it's a bit of a fairness question, and I would just ask we need to consider that, because that's a big, it could cost that magnitude is significant.
Well, 10,000 units times a $13,000 change, $130 million, which would help us put in a brand-new sewer plant, but it's just that's a big number across all those approved but not yet built. And I don't know that I necessarily have an issue with it necessarily, except it's a huge number when you just look at it in mass. And I don't know what it would do on the individual developments. Yeah.
If I may, your points are valid, and the model, there's two parts, at least the way myself look at it. First of all is the equity model of the SFUE, so that we can begin to charge what a particular property use will use, and charge them appropriately instead of maybe a bigger model, a bigger meter size that has more capacity than they need, or a smaller one to try to game the system. But that also then allows us, as we grow as a community, to understand what our capacity is within certain areas of the community, that we're not affording more capacity to a building or a use that won't use it. How we implement, and granted, we can do a better job with our impact fees and our permit fees that relate to the cost of service to update them more frequently. And we acknowledge that in this case. How we implement is, as we've done in other cases, trying to move forward, because the cost of service is what it is. And as Alderman Baggett mentioned, the material providers in building have a cost of service too, and this economy has highlighted how that fluctuates. Hopefully that helps. Doesn't give the answer and the fairness, but
Well,
it's reality.
The other point is, you've got the bill coming. How are you going to divide the bill?
Yeah.
Somebody's going to pay that. Is it fall on the ratepayer? Does it fall on others in the system? I mean, you know, this is the policy decision we're asking you to make. How do you most equitably assign those costs? And this is the technique we're proposing, because we think it's the most fair, because it gets at the actual demand on the system, as opposed to an arbitrary meter size, which, as you get to these larger meters, is, you saw from that example, wildly broad in terms of the different components it can cover. So it's a great point, but it's also, at the end of the day, we got to figure out how to divide the bill.
And to put it in perspective, they added a $10,000 impact fee to new homes that were built, and it has not slowed down our desire for homes at all. So keep it in perspective, because let's look at this as if it is the city hall. On this building A and B, this is even larger than the proposed city hall. So if we're talking about a $106 million build at 100,000 square feet, roughly, or whatever, for the city hall, this would be double or triple the size of this. So relatively speaking, 400,000 is kind of a drop in the bucket, even though to you and I, it sounds like an arm and a leg. But my other question was, how many times do people ever switch out meters? Like, maybe a business is being used as a restaurant, and it converts into a laundromat. So that would require a new meter, because they need a new size pipe to connect. Does that happen very often? And that would obviously fall under this?
Yeah, so that's ironic. Mark and I were talking about that a couple weeks ago. Is we don't currently have a system in place to do that. We've actually talked about maybe, after a year or two of a full business, of reevaluating that, to see if it needs to be increased any, to kind of prevent
Like a
people
reconciliation
from,
type of thing.
shysting the system a little bit. Not giving any of that capacity back, but if we need to assess more, because you've got a full office building now, to have that ability to do that.
So the other thing, if we have, infill development where, you have a law office that changes to a restaurant, and typically they'll have to up the size of the meter. Right now, what we do is pay the incremental increase from, say, a 3/4 inch meter to a 1 inch meter. In this instance, we would have to evaluate, again, what the differential impact would be from the law office use to a restaurant use, and then apply a fee accordingly. So we do look at infill type development when we're adding capacity.
But does this take any more of a different pipe, or is it just the meter that's different?
Oftentimes, it'll take a larger pipe. It really depends, and depends on where you are in the system. Give you an example, if you're in a high pressure area, you can put a lot more water through a 3/4 inch meter than we would like to see. That's how sometimes you see smaller meters being used when a larger meter would be used in a lower pressure area. So a lot of it has to do with pressure.
Alderman Potts and Alderman Bonjour.
Yes, thank you. Follow-up question on this is, do we know of other cities that have used a similar practice here, either lessons learned, best practices that you can kind of share with us as we're talking through it? Cities of similar size, or maybe they just use the same type of plan?
The methodology that we've come up is somewhat unique. We'll be probably one of the first to go during this specific way of figuring SFUEs, but there are communities that have similar type ways of doing it. We looked at one that was in California. It was under what was called an equivalent development unit. We also looked at the community Cary, North Carolina. They're looking at adopting it based on a square footage type model. So there are some similar methodologies being looked at. It does appear that square footage facilities are going to become, at least on the sewer side, how you calculate what that SFUE is, but ours will be unique to itself.
Yeah, I think a lot of communities look to find a more equitable way to do it. Meter size is used pretty broadly. You'll see it all over the place. The instance of square footage, for example, that square footage in the background gets translated into a flow. And that's how everyone develops that impact fee using the M1 manual that Michelle had referenced
Perfect.
earlier.
And just a follow-up comment on that, since we are going to be trailblazing on this, I'd definitely like to see what that 12, 24, 36-month plan is as we're going back to reevaluate to make sure that we do have people in the right place and doing the right things.
Well, I think Eric made a comment a while ago, and I think that's probably what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the cost to operate the system, and the current ratepayer should not be paying that cost to cover the additional capacity that's needed because of growth. And that's basically where I'm at on this right here. So when we come back out and we say there's a $13,000 change or whatever it is, I may be gasping at that change, but I'm not going to put that change on that person that's currently living here now. So that's my take on this presentation.
Go ahead, Alderman Brown.
I don't know if you're still going to hit the recommendation slide, but I just have a question on that timing of the rollout and why we would phase it in that way. Am I jumping ahead? There's a recommendation for 2 increases spanning through to
Phase in.
July 2023.
Are there more
Yes.
slides to
And
go over?
while I just said,
There are a couple more slides if you want
Let's go ahead
to.
and pick that up.
I think Alderman Baggett had a question also.
Sorry, one more. I'm just, again, trying to back into, we're approving an additional fee for a plant that we have not voted on yet, or we have not decided on, and for a usage amount that is 1 billion more gallons, 1.5 billion more than we have currently at the current plant. So then I'm trying to back into how many SFUEs is the new plant planning for? I mean, is that so are we building a plant that is going to just what we need to serve the 17,000 additional units that we were told last meeting that we need? Or are we building a plant that is to, those are the
Right.
questions.
If you want to hang on for just
Okay, sorry.
just
All right.
just a minute.
Thank you.
we got to slow down.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we go back to the next slide, Angie, which is the schedule. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, so this is kind of the project schedule that we're on. So, we're going to later on, a little bit later this year, before we make the decision about the new capacity that we need, we're going to do some updates on the IWRP. But the IWRP indicated that we really need to have 8 million gallons of new capacity online by 2030. So using that recommendation and kind of backing up from that, that's what you see here is kind of where we are right now in the timeline that we need to be on. So we anticipate, we have the pilot construction. It's a little bit delayed due to some supply chain issues, but in the fallish of this year, we're going to operate that for 9 months. And then, we have the design for 2.5 years after that. We anticipate awarding this in July of 2026, and then for construction to take about 4 years, which is consistent with what our current facility is, and that would put us at the 2030 timeframe. So we realize that as y'all were mentioning, that we're not building, or we're not building this capacity. We've not made the decision that we need this new capacity at this point yet. We're still doing the work. So the next slide, Angie, is where we talk about kind of the phased approach. So we do recommend increasing the water impact fee to the full amount right now because we've already incurred those costs. For the sewer impact fees, because we're not at the full, the total cost yet, we recommend kind of a phased approach where that would put us at recapturing that cost if we get to that point. Next year would be the next phase. So the first phase of increasing it to the $8,400, which would be about a $5,000 increase from what it is now. And then next year, when you will have made that decision of a new facility, to increase the fees again to recapture that total cost.
So I'd like to point out that the schedule that's in the presentation here, I think we were originally looking at a July 1 implementation. We believe that date's going to slide.
Yeah.
Because we gotta prepare. I think Michelle's scheduled to go to the Design Professionals Group in May to have a conversation with them about it based on feedback we get from you this evening. But yeah, to discuss some of the points you were making is that the facility recommendation is 8 million gallons a day. Okay, so that divided by 350 equates to about 23,000 single-family unit equivalents. And that is intended to provide capacity for development generally in the southern part of the city. If you look at the basin plans, it comes from other areas as well. And then we'll be looking at diverting some flow that goes to Claudia Yates currently to this new facility as well. So we can anticipate additional infill growth in the northern part of the city, as well as some open, undeveloped land in the northern part of the city as well. So yeah, 8 MGD was the initial recommendation out of the IWRP. Those numbers are getting validated through this study right now. We expect, and again, looking at being validated through this pilot study with Hazen, we expect a total capacity, additional needed capacity of 16 MGD, so 32 total across the city.
So one of the things we did in the Integrated Water Resource Plan, the IWRP, was there was this chart out of 30 years of demand, and there were 3 lines. There was a moderate growth, a high growth, and a kind of middle ground. And our actual experience in the roughly 10 years since then has been much closer to that aggressive or high level than the other 2 lines. So that's what we're trying to reflect in what we're putting in terms of the demand on the system and the decisions we'll ask you to make in the next year or so around that additional capacity. And so we're just trying to ramp up so that we're able to start charging those that are going to be coming onto the system and benefit from that capacity, the sooner the better, so that you can capture those dollars and minimize what you have to borrow long term and help you build the capacity to build the plants that you need.
One thing, before I recognize you, one thing I don't see in here is getting the permit. And so can you help us put that in this timeline also?
Yeah, so I was afraid about that. Yeah, so we anticipate the latter part of the, you're going to be seeing another amendment coming from Hazen, actually in the next month or so, to start the application for the permit. And so we're doing this concurrently because with the last part of the pilot operation, and then there will be a little bit of time where they'll be pulling all the results together. Because when we begin design of the facility, we need to submit the permit application. So we've had calls with TDEC where we've talked about the water quality model that we would need to have, and then kind of to have their buy-in on the type of model we're using, the type of data that we need to pull. When you apply for a new permit, there's a lot of anti-degradation requirements, so we need to ensure that we're not degrading the river. We need to ensure that we're not degrading the surrounding community, and that's part of that analysis.
Go ahead, Alderman
Well,
Peterson.
that's not what I was going to originally start off with, but remember that southeast plant would be, what? It would be coming out of there and going right into our water treatment plant.
Well, that's part of what you'll make decisions on, is
That's
how
right.
that
That's
water
what I'm
gets
saying,
routed
yeah.
and where it goes into, your reclaim system, other options.
But I'm just
multiple
saying.
options for your use of the water
And so-
asset.
Yeah, and the purpose of the pilot plan is to actually pilot some of these advanced technologies. So we could potentially be, the water coming from the South Clean Water Facility would be ready to go into the water plan. I mean, it's going to be that clean. It's going to be much cleaner than our north facility, just because of the limits of technology.
And that wasn't what I was going to really talk about, but whenever you brought that up. If I'm looking at this, the new capacity by 2030, now I know it wouldn't just be for development units. I mean, wait, let me see. The dwelling units, they're not just be for dwelling units, but you're talking about 23,000 in the space of 10 years, and
We're
that would-
growing 2,000 people a year for the past 20 years.
That's right, 2,000 people a year, but that would be, this would be, that these, no, every individual would not be a dwelling unit. Do you see what I'm trying to say? It would not be an SFU.
And there's non-residential development. It puts
Absolutely,
demand on the
absolutely.
system too.
But what I'm saying is, what we have gone from, and I'm just sorry, I didn't think about thinking of this, but right now, the sewer treatment plant, I mean, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that, that we're increasing by 4 million gallons per day, is that right? So, and this has been, we've been needing this, of course, but I'm just saying that this would be twice that much if we're talking about 8 million gallons per day for this. So, and I know we've been needing the 4 million gallon, or some amount of increase on what we currently provide for sewer treatment, but it sounds like needing twice that much new in the space of 10 years.
So the decision was made to upgrade and expand the existing facility a number of years ago.
Many years ago.
Yeah, so the limit of that expansion was 4 million gallons. We couldn't get any additional
Could not.
treatment capacity
Exactly,
through
could not
that. So
get
that's
permits.
how we landed at the 4 MGD. The 8 MGD, it's really a balance on how often you want to go and get permits, how often you want to go out and design and bid and build projects. We think if we continue to grow at the rate we're growing, that 8 MGD is a good alternative. I think adding a 4 MGD would be way undersizing any expansion, because we would be just turning right around and doing it again. A 6 is questionable. Again, that's some work that we're looking at right now to evaluate. But you really want to limit the amount of times you have to go back to not only to you all and have these conversations, but to bid out major projects. The other piece too is if you oversize, you're having current impacts being applied to development that's happening now, but they won't need that additional treatment capacity necessarily. Does that make sense? So let's just say the sake for simple math here is if we go to a 16 MGD facility now, that impact fee relative to the south plant would be about $20,000 per single family unit. Did I do that right? Is it 10,000 for the?
Well, it would probably be about 30, because when you add all the equity.
Okay, so really the development that's coming in now would be paying for a capacity that's completely unrelated to them. So that's always this balance of what makes sense, and timing is a big part of that.
But
I
also,
hope that helps.
I will want to see what TDEC and whoever says is going to be a maximum of that forever, not just for right now, because the river is not going to change. And so what I'm saying is, does that mean that, I'm just saying, does that mean that once we get to that, then no more development?
That's a decision. It's up.
But we may not always be discharging into the river.
Yeah, you don't just discharge, you put it in the
Well, they were
the
remember,
reclaim
well,
system and some of the other.
nobody but Clyde may remember this, but they were originally talking about spreading it out just on the ground.
Got to have a lot of land. Alderman Baggett?
Or make sure I understand, because you've thrown out the 8 million and the 16. So I want to make sure that we all, make sure I understand. The new plan is 8 million by 2030 for this 269 million. That's 8 million.
Gallons per day.
But you're saying there's another plan that needs 16, or is that the 8 plus the current 8 that we
It
have?
would be,
No.
we would look at ultimate capacity based on the integrated plan, which is getting reevaluated right now. Total capacity, built-out condition, 32 million gallons a day.
At the south?
16 at the north, 16 at the south.
16 to 16.
So we're looking at splitting up the south capacity in two
Kind of phases.
phases, right?
So that's 46,000 SFUE with the south
An
plant
additional 46,000,
fully built out.
correct.
And that is really kind of a long-term, really kind of Franklin build-out scenario. And that's what we're trying to do, is give you long-term thinking.
Yep. And that'll have to be reevaluated regularly, depending on how much density you want to look at Cool Springs at the Goose Creek area. So yes, that's
It's
something.
both
that-
development and redevelopment.
Correct.
It's impacting the systems.
Go ahead, Alderman Potts.
Thank you. That actually kind of made me start thinking about growth going east as we're talking Goose Creek and expanding towards Arrington and Triune and those areas. Is there a limit on the number of pump stations that you can have on one of these plants to get, because you're now moving up in topography, you're moving up in elevation there? Is there any restriction on these to have?
So there's, I think the mayor said no pump stations. So, yeah, well, we don't, there's not a limit on pump stations. It's based off of the flow. We typically, before me, David Parker and Mark have designed the system really well. It's a lot of deep sewers, which eliminate the use of pump stations. Pump stations are moving parts. They're, electrical cost, all of those replacements. So we try to avoid them if we can. There's some scenarios where you're right, we would, as we talk about the Mays Creek Basin, there's some stations up there that, we would have to have. So
would we rely on this to continue to take us, if you will, north towards 96 and south towards 840 in that pie shape like that?
Look at the UGB. That's what we're talking about.
Entire.
This is the UGB. This isn't beyond that. This isn't
Right.
the rest of the county.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is Franklin and the UGB.
Yeah, well, when somebody mentioned we're looking 30, 10, 20, 30 years out, that's what I was looking at.
And that's what your
20,000.
UGB
Right.
reflects. Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Absolutely.
okay, so we'll go. Let's see. So Angie's already at the next slide. So this is I just kind of just as a summary. We've had some good discussion, but so we're looking at reiterating just providing equitable fees, tying the fees to the projected demands that drive capital investment and planning. So getting them away from just the operations of meter size. We're encouraging, so this new methodology would encourage the use of fire suppression systems. So we mentioned at the last meeting, it wouldn't require an additional meter. That would require an additional cost. It would be based on the demand, right? And then we've talked about this before, but reducing the ratepayer demand to fund growth-related infrastructure. So we also talked about action now, will prevent future impact to the existing ratepayers. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is kind of the timeline, and this is up for, if we need to modify this. So the next work session, you gave us some good questions. We're going to go back and kind of work on some of those questions and providing a response, but I really don't have any more presentations, any more information, just kind of a feedback session where you can ask some questions or we can provide what we've done to you and we can just talk a little bit more to make sure everyone's on the same page. My intent was that first May meeting to present the ordinance change to y'all if we agree to move this route. And then we would have the 3 readings for July 1st implementation. Yes.
Alderman Brown.
Just a comment on that phase timing, and I may be alone on this one. I'll save you my soapbox on aggressive growth, but I think the reality is we're going to need service. We're going to need expanded service. The only thing, the idea of sort of doing half of it now and half of it later, honestly, it's about $20 million left on the table over the next year, not going and just going ahead and assessing the fee. We haven't changed fees in a long time, moving to a new methodology. I think the reality that we're going to have significant growth and we're going to need that. Costs are going to keep going up. I doubt that you're that far off on the on the calculation, that we shouldn't just make make the change, and look, if later on we can bring it back down, then maybe there is that. But it seems to me like if you're going to do it, go ugly early and get the fee done, because now you're going to have to step in it, and unless we're trying to create an incentive to get people to build faster sooner. If you're trying to do that, then great. But I think the reality is, I don't know. I'm just in favor of why baby step into it, make the change, and let's go with it.
Well, it's highly
I
unlikely
know.
that these are going down. Highly unlikely.
It's true.
To quote Clyde, if you didn't hear, it's highly unlikely the fees are going down. Clyde Barnhill,
Well, and we.
April 12th, 2022.
I was going to say, this does really help the people who are here now, who are already here.
Right, exactly.
Because the other side is that then they would be putting a lot more money in, and still will be.
Right.
There's no question about that. But still, that is, it's going to be interesting to see whenever you're going to the development professionals, is that it?
In May.
In May,
I may
okay.
delegate that to Brian.
Okay.
Great discussion. You getting
you.
what you need?
Yes, thank you.
Ready to break? We're adjourned unless there's some other business. I've got a offline question.